Greetings sailors and welcome to my first look at the Leningrad, the upcoming premium Soviet destroyer. Now, this is a little bit later than planned, although that's partly not my fault actually. Yesterday was the day I'd set aside for doing this, and I didn't manage to get it done, so I've had to continue on through to today. But yeah, Wargaming EU basically didn't tell us the embargo date, so that was a bit of a goof on the part of the Paris office. And the first us EU contributors knew that the embargo had lifted was the fact that the NA contributors started posting their videos, and we were all left slightly wondering what was going on. But as goofs go, it's a fairly minor one in the scheme of things. So the Leningrad, it is at tier 7, and it actually is representing a class of ships not in the game already. So this is not a premium version of an existing ship. This is something a little bit different. It does share a lot of the characteristics of the regular Soviet destroyers, but it's also got some things that are more reminiscent of other destroyer lines as well, but we will come to those. So first game, tier 8 as you can see, and I was in a division with a Kiev, as Yachty 70 there. But this game, although I was in a division, it really, it was less important that I was in a division. The second game, however, you will get to see a lot more squad-based play. There's a lot more kind of cooperation going on, a lot more coordination. So as ever, I will start with the stats, and then I'll talk about the gameplay. And it's two reasonably long matches, so I probably will get through all the stats in the first game at this. Well, I've managed it sort of already. This is, I don't even know what attempt number recording this is, but I've gotten about halfway through, and then it all goes pear-shaped. So let's hope this time works. So hit points. This thing has got the second best hit points of the tier 7 destroyers, and it's only a couple of hundred behind the Błyskawica, but that means that there's a bit of a disparity now between the premium tier 7 destroyers and the regular tier 7 destroyers, because these have both got over 15,000 hit points, and the next best regular destroyer is the Mayhan with 14,000, just over 14,000, and in fact the Kiev and the Hatsaharu are both under 13,000. So compared to the regular destroyers, you can take a couple of extra hits depending on what's shooting at you, but still 15,000 isn't like it's a huge amount of health, but it is maybe a little bit advantageous. Armament is the regular 130mm Soviet destroyer guns. And you actually have a 5x1 layout. You've got 5 single turrets, which is actually what the Mayhan has. This is, of course, rather different from the Kiev, which has got 3 double turrets and therefore more guns. The arrangement is also a little bit awkward in that to the front you have enough clearance for both your front-mounted guns to fire, but at the rear you can only fire 1 in a direction directly after. I don't know how big the cone exactly would be, but there is a second turret there, but you can only fire it at an angle to each side because there is an anti-aircraft turret that's actually blocking its line of fire. So it's a little bit awkward when you're running away from people and you only have 1 turret that you can bring to bear. And if you want to fire all of your turrets, well, you have to be sitting really quite broadside. Reload time is 5 seconds, just the same as the Kiev, and that's reasonably fast, not quite as fast as the Mayhan, but still it's better than the Błyskawica in that regard. And then we get to the turret turn time, and although you might consider just the number of turrets and the turret arrangement to be a bit different from the rest of the Soviet destroyers, this is where it starts to be something off on its own. It's not really quite the same as the rest. It has the worst turret turn time at tier 7. It's even worse than the Hatsaharu. It's 27.7 seconds. It's nearly 28-second turret turn. That isn't so good, at least not for engaging other destroyers. It means that, like the Hatsaharu, you have to hold fire until you've got all your turrets round, and at that point you can open up. but the turret placement also means that sometimes you're only going to have, say, 2 or 3 guns available to fire at people. So overall, the guns they're decent, but they're not the strength necessarily of this ship. Not like, say, with the Kiev. It's not just the fact that you have joint leased guns along with the Mayhan. It's just that that turret turn. That's probably the least good thing about this ship. It is quite awkward to use sometimes because of that. Range is also worse than the Kiev, although with a base range of 11.6, that's slightly better, slightly worse rather than the Mayhan. So it's not terrible for its tier, but with the Kiev having a base of 12.3, it's a reasonably significant difference rather. And if you take AFT into the equation, well, you have 13.9, whereas the Kiev can get 14.8. So that's another way in which the guns are a little bit weaker than the standard. Like I said, I don't consider the guns to be the biggest strength of this ship, not by a long shot. Shell damage, pretty much the same. Well, it is basically the same as the Kiev. It's essentially the same guns. 2500 AP damage, 1600 HE. So you've got the best AP, but the worst HE damage. However, the 8% fire chance on the HE is pretty good. That's a pretty solid percentage, I guess you'd say, which is the same as, well, obviously the Kiev, but also the Błyskawica. That gets 8% as well. Secondaries, well, it doesn't have any. In fact, the Kiev is, I think, the only one that does when it's fully upgraded. I'm not sure about the Mayhan C hull, actually. I basically plugged in the numbers for the B hull. The C hull on the Mayhan is what you use if you want the defensive AA ability. And most people don't play with the defensive AA on destroyers. Although, at the higher tiers, I think from the Benson upwards, it becomes a bit more common. But you can, in theory, do it from the Farragut onwards, and people don't tend to. Anyway, AA is not great. It is, in theory, a bit better than the Błyskawica, but not as good as the Kiev, the Mayhan, or the Hatsaharu, but it's destroyer AA. You're probably going to shoot down 1 or 2 planes occasionally, but on the whole, it's not going to save you. And you don't get defensive AA or anything like that. It doesn't have any special consumables in this case. It's literally just smoke and speed boost, which is fairly standard for a destroyer. Torpedoes, however, are something a bit different. Like some of the other Soviet premiums, like, say, the Kutuzov and the Gremyashi and the Molotov, this gets 8-kilometer torpedoes. Actually, no, having said that, does the Molotov get 8-kilometer torps, or is it only 4? I can't remember. Anyway, but the Kutuzov definitely gets 8-kilometer torpedoes, and I haven't checked directly, but they might even be pretty much the same torps. So you've got 2 quad tubes, and you'll have been able to see the arcs at various points during this. So they're all right. They're not super good, but they're not super restricted. It's not like the... I'm trying to remember what the arcs are like on the Hatsaharu now. I'm up to the Fubuki at this point with the Japanese destroyers, and the Fubuki torpedo arcs are not particularly good. But on this, they are all right. You get 15,000 damage per torpedo, obviously without any reduction taken into account from people's torpedo protection. But the biggest change is 8 kilometers. You get an 8-kilometer range, which is obviously exactly double what the Kiev has, and it's the same as the Błyskawica. Now, these are slightly more powerful torpedoes than the Błyskawica has. That's got torpedoes that do a bit less damage, and they're also slower on the Błyskawica, but on the Błyskawica you get a quicker reload. However, having said that, the minute and a half reload time on this is still not bad. It's around about what the Mayhan has, so I mean, a worse range than the Mayhan, but more damage than the Mayhan, so it's fairly comfortable in terms of its torpedoes. And in combination with another factor, it actually makes this rather different for a Soviet destroyer. Speed, you've got 43 knots, which is pretty blisteringly fast. That's even faster than the Kiev, and actually that puts it on a par with the Khabarovsk at tier 10. So this is a joint fastest destroyer in the game. In fact, probably one of the... I'm pretty sure the Khabarovsk is fastest ship in the game. So this is, you know, as fast. And the speed is probably one of the best things about this, but that's true of a lot of the Soviet destroyers. And of course the Kiev's not far behind, that's only half a knot slower, and I think the Tashkent is the same. So it's not like it feels significantly faster than the Kiev. That's I've made that mistake before, I'm sure, or that little verbal derp. But yeah, it's nice to have that bit extra, and of course you can boost that even further with your speed boost and your Sierra Mike flags. I don't think I ever tried the Sierra Mike flags on this, but even just the speed boost you can get to over 44 knots, and the Sierra Mike can probably get you to, I don't know, approaching 45 if not over 45 knots. Now with that speed comes an appropriately wide turning circle. It's 690 meters, which alongside the Kiev is the worst for the tier. So yeah, it's fast, but you pay for that speed with a not particularly tight turning circle. And sometimes that'll be a problem, but for the most part, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. It's just you won't be nearly as nimble in the water as the Hatsuharu or the Meihan will. Rudder shift is actually better than the Kiev. It's 3.7 seconds, but 3.7 is still not super fantastic. 3.7 is kind of average for tier 7. The Błyskawica is the worst actually at 5.8, and then the Hatsuharu gets 2.3. So in that context, 3.7, yeah, it is somewhere in the middle. And then we come to concealment. And this is the part where it really starts to shine. I think concealment is probably, or the concealment value is in combination with the torpedoes and all the rest of it is by far the best thing about this ship. Your base detection range without camo, 7.5 kilometers. But of course, you're going to be using camo because it's a premium ship and it comes with free premium camo. So it's effectively 7.3. Compare that to a Kiev with camo, which has 8.7. It's a fairly significant difference. And this means that you can stealth torpedo, which is not a usual thing for Soviet destroyers. I think the Gremyashi is the only other Soviet destroyer that can do that. And of course, you can't buy a Gremyashi these days. So yeah, that stealth value, that extra ability to stay hidden is extremely powerful in a destroyer, and especially for a Soviet gunboat. And it does probably represent the biggest change overall. That and the turret turn time, and the ability then to stealth drop. So basically you're trading primary firepower for the ability to be more stealthy and to make torpedoes. Stealth torpedo drops. Yeah, that's totally, that should be a thing from now on. Stealth torpedoes are torpedoes. Absolutely, yes. Torpedo destroyers. That's exactly what they're called. So absolute best case scenario with the concealment, if you had the captain's skill, the 5th point captain's skill, you'd get down to 6.5 kilometers, and that actually would be second best for the tier. Now at the moment, the very best is the Hatsuharu with potentially 5.8, but of course the Japanese destroyers are changing around in the near future, so the two new Japanese destroyers at tier 7 might have different values for now, who knows, but I suspect they'll still be fairly stealthy. But still, 6.5 potentially is pretty good. I mean, in terms of being able to make stealth torpedo drops, it's exceptionally useful. Even creeping up to people relatively close and smoking and then dropping torpedoes in the water and just firing away at them, that could also be useful. Although, of course, tier 7 is a tier where you start to have to think about radar. You can start to meet ships much more commonly that will have that available. Well, in theory, you can do that from tier 5, but it's a lot more likely from tier 7. But still, it is incredibly useful to be able to be that sneaky in a Soviet destroyer. So it seems like a good trade to me to have fewer guns available, but in return to be able to just whip along and drop torpedoes from stealth from time to time. And that, in this battle, served me reasonably well. Air detection, very last thing, 4.3 kilometers, very slightly better than the Kiev, but still pretty bad for tier 7 overall. I mean, the Kiev is the worst at tier 7, and this is only very slightly better than that, so everybody else is under 4 kilometers. And that means that, well, you'll get spotted a little bit sooner from the air, but overall, I mean, it's probably one of the slightly less important stats. So, in this game, I've basically covered everything. As you can see, it came down to being just a couple of ships versus just a couple of ships, but crucially, the enemy team were able to have majority cap control for quite a lot of the battle. So, I mean, we've got half the points they do. This is why controlling the cap points really does matter. But to be a little bit fair to my own team, it's a new map, and I don't know, maybe not everybody had a clear idea of where to go. But even though it's come down to now being fairly close, it's just one of these times when it's too little too late. We'd have to kill the entirety of the rest of their team in very rapid succession. And as we could see from that very brief glimpse of the Colorado, he's quite low health. He's not going to last. However, I might get this Megami, and he doesn't know, you know, nobody knows at this point that this thing has 8-kilometer torpedoes, or, well, I say nobody, hardly anybody knows, but as time progresses, people will be more aware that this has longer range torp, so people will be a bit more cautious around it. But when I was playing it and testing it, I think people saw it and kind of assumed it would be the usual short-range torpedo boat. But I'm not quite sure. I mean, overall, the Soviet premiums, the Murmansk, there's another example. That's got 8-kilometer torps as well. The Soviet premiums have tended to have longer-range torpedoes. And this is definitely no exception. So this is one of the last ships. We've almost lost this anyway on points, so I decided to just do a banzai charge towards this guy. But even though, you know, in theory I could make it, in theory, I'm not going to. There's just not enough time. We're about to lose this on points. So, yeah, there will be no last glorious suicide ramming charge, sadly. So there we are, just shy of 100,000 damage. I think this was the best damage game that I managed to do. And as you can see from the breakdown, there were a number of torp hits. That was enough to... I can't remember the exact proportion. I think it was about a third to maybe more than a third of the torpedo damage. But we'll see in a second anyway. So it's irrelevant me trying to remember because it's going to come up on the screen anyhow. Anyway, second place on the team, so it wasn't a bad result. So there we go. 39k from guns, 44k from torpedoes, and the rest was fires and floodings. So there we are. That wasn't a bad game. It's just a pity that we lost. And as we can see from that screen, 250,000 credits profit. That could have been even more if we'd won. But yeah, that was not a bad result for a loss. And of course, it being a premium, the ability to make credits rather counts. But I don't think it's anything special in that regard. So again, in a division, and this time round it's a division of 3, and there's another Leningrad. So this is Rata, Strangers 1, 2, 3, and myself, and Strangers is also in one of these things. And this is a slightly older patch. This is the previous patch, in fact. So we have the minimap labels working, which is rather useful. It's my one thing that I really want them to add is minimap labels, and I'm sure they'll get round to it, but it just would be really quite handy. So there was a good deal more coordination in this one. I was on TeamSpeak with both these guys, and we were moving together as a group, basically. We were trying to work together and support each other. And of course, 2 destroyers and a battleship means you can at times smoke the battleship. I actually tried to smoke an ally in that previous game, and then I think he sailed out of it. And it's always a bit tricky because sometimes it comes down to a split-second decision of am I going to drop smoke now, or there's not always time to ask. And sometimes even when you do ask, especially on the EU server, there's no guarantee that somebody speaks the same language as you. So at that point it becomes a bit awkward because maybe they do want a smoke screen but they just don't know what the hell you're asking. So we have scared off that Błyskawica, and that's an island. Yes, this is where that turn radius becomes, this kind of close manoeuvring, it becomes a little more problematic. I probably would have been able to make that in, well, any other destroyer, but not in this one. Well, I say any other destroyer, of course, not the Kiev either, because that's the same. So we're going to move eastwards a little bit at this point, at least myself and strangers are, and maybe work the middle. I mean, it's a typical North match. Everybody sails up and down and exchanges fire, and we see who loses health first and who gets the early advantage. And it's a war of attrition up until a certain point, and then it becomes worth pushing after that certain point. But sometimes it's just a matter of who blinks first in terms of who gets the early advantage. So we can see there's a couple of their destroyers down there. Is that Lo Yang? Yes. I said Benson there. It effectively is a Benson. He's laying smoke across, so that means I can sit and just fire. And here we can see the disadvantage of that turret arrangement, because I can fire literally one gun right now. So I'm going to angle out slightly, and it's going to take a little while for my turrets to come round. Now, I think with I can't remember what equipment I had on this, but with the previous game, which is actually the more recent game, I set it up with the I can't remember which one it is, but it's the main gun battery module that gives you better turret traverse for a slightly worse reload time. And if you've got the BFT captain skill, you're offsetting that worse reload time anyway. So that's one I would actually recommend, is getting, I think it's like a 15% extra turret turn time. I think that's worthwhile having on this particular destroyer. And it's still going to be, I think, over 20 seconds to get your turrets around from side to side. But yeah, it does help having that extra bit of flexibility. So again, trying to smoke an ally, except I probably misjudged this. And he doesn't seem interested in, like, if he'd wanted concealment, he would have turned inwards there anyway. So again, I didn't ask, and it was a bit of a waste of a smoke charge, but at least I can use it myself. I also put out one lot of torpedoes and held back the other in reserve, just as a speculative thing. But they're all more or less outside of range at the moment. So unless there's a destroyer very close by, those aren't going to do anything. I do, however, have sufficient gun range here, so with the smoke down, I might as well use it myself. So that Bismarck's taking all kinds of fire. I mean, this is clearly a guy with a secondary build, because his secondaries were opening up on me before, so I'm going to have to be a little bit wary about that. There's also an Iowa coming forwards. This could be nice, actually, if he decides to start pushing. So I'm going to put some torpedoes down. But if I could get a fire first, if he could get some fires and then repair it, and then I could hit him with torpedoes and then he floods, that would be nice. I'm not sure why I was moving out the smoke here. I maybe just was concerned that the smoke was about to run out anyway, so I decided to, I don't know, just start getting into motion. But then I kind of slowed down, so I don't know what my decision-making process was there exactly. I will note, another bit of equipment I've got on this is the engine modification that gives you, was it plus 50% acceleration from a standing start. So with the speed of this thing, if you've got that mod in particular, again, that's another one I recommend, you can just take off from a standing start like an absolute rocket. So one torpedo finds its mark, probably on the Iowa, and it caused a flooding, so I might be actually getting some flooding myself. Raider there making a pass to drop his own torpedoes, I think. There's also some incoming from the enemy destroyers. And alongside that Hatsu, we also know the enemy Błyskawica is there. And, oh, hello! Okay, yeah, that was a detonation. So, bit unlucky for that guy, but it happens sometimes, and it's a bit annoying when it does happen. At least you get some flags out of it. This is one of the things I've said previously about detonations versus turret incapacitations. For detonations, at least you get a flag that stops it happening in the future. With turret incapacitations, you just get shafted. So again, Iowa, it's just, I mean, I'm going to drop on him again, and I'm not quite sure why he decided to go forwards here, but this is too tempting a target not to try and take out. And this is an enemy top tier battleship as well. I mean, the previous one was a tier 8 game, this is obviously a tier 9 game, but not that many tier 9s. This Iowa is just done for. He's burning from stem to stern, and I don't even think my torpedoes are going to get there. He's going down so rapidly. And there we go, I actually get him through fire damage. So thus far, I've only got 1 torpedo hit, so I would have done much more up to this point through fire, gun damage, and potentially flooding as well. I might have actually gotten some flooding on the Iowa. I can't remember offhand if I did or not, but we'll see on the end score screen. I might have done. So I've jumped ahead a little bit, still on the same flank, still playing with the enemy ships that are here. We've actually got some ships that were making a push on the other side as well. And although we're halfway through, there's not been a lot of casualties on either side so far. We've lost 3 ships, they've lost 3 ships, but one of the 3 ships they've lost has been their Iowa. So that's some of my torpedoes going in on the Scharnhorst, and 2 hits, very nice. That puts him well within range of being able to finish him off with guns. I think he immediately repaired the flooding, and I think he's actually trying to heal at this point. But all it's going to take is, I mean, 1 fire and just more shells. I mean, even though he's repairing, he's done for. He really doesn't have a lot of chance of getting out of this. And the funny thing is, it was really him having run aground. I mean, that was a bit of a speculative torpedo drop, and him having run aground was what got me those torpedo strikes and what ultimately led to him getting killed. Strangers that time, however, gets the kill. And I think if I just had a couple more shots, maybe I probably could have gotten that myself, but never mind. That's a nice extra chunk of damage. At this stage, we pretty much have broken this. They have 1 destroyer that was going towards our cap. The Błyskawica's still around here somewhere as well. The Nagato is down to half health, and there's a Błyskawica. They've also got a Pensacola who's rather far back, but still spotted because, you know, Pensacola. And on the other side, they seem to have done some damage to the teammates that pressed there. So it's not like we've definitely won on that side. But overall, we seem to be in a reasonably good position. We are on the offensive. We're the ones that are now in control of the pace of this game, even though I think we're only 1 ship apart, team-wise. So yeah, we seem to have the initiative at this point. So I'm just going to run and gun, use my speed, dodge the incoming shells, and maybe try and fire some in return. Although that's where the turret arrangement comes in a bit awkward. So that destroyer that was capping got killed by, I think, strangers, not sure. No, somebody else killed him. Strangers have still only got 1 kill. And at this stage, I mean, we could have pressed around that flank, but we've consolidated back more towards the middle, and now we're the ones that are a ship down. We've got 1 ship over still on the 9 line who's playing with a destroyer, but the rest of the force that pressed around there did get taken care of. So we're going to make the breakthrough. We're sort of going to have to rely on Raider to do it. He's our last battleship. But we need to work together here. We need to give him screening. We need to give him warning of any torpedoes that might be incoming. So I got a hit on the Benson, lay down some smoke because that's quite a lot of incoming fire. And although the smoke then becomes a torpedo magnet, that at least buys me a little bit of time. So it looks like that Bismarck is about to go down. And again, I've only put out 1 lot of okay, I'd put out 1 lot of torpedoes earlier. I think I was just staggering my torpedo releases a bit in this game, just so I would not have to wait the full reload period I'd always have a shorter time between having torpedoes available. But I can't actually remember if I get any more torpedo hits in this game. This is going to be... no, I don't think I do, actually. This is going to be a game with less damage than the previous one. But this one's actually going to be a victory. I'll maybe give that away now. We've had one loss, and having 2 losses would be... I don't know, just from an entertainment point of view, it would be maybe a bit disappointing. But no, this one, even though it is, in theory, a worse result, just in terms of gameplay and damage, it is, in fact, going to be a win. So speed boost going. They've got 2 destroyers and 2 cruisers, a cruiser and a battleship rather. And I know for a fact that Benson's low health because I left him on low health. And I think it was around this time I was saying, well, if I was this guy, I'd probably be over here trying to lay an ambush. And lo and behold, so it was. So 1 hit, but he's already put his torpedoes out. And the fact that I came around here and spotted these torpedoes is incredibly good news for Reta, because otherwise he probably would have just kept going forwards and eaten a face full of those, which could have been fatal. So with Benson out of the way, that just leaves the Błyskawica, who's much further back. Reta was given sufficient warning to kill his speed and turn, and he's just hammering the Scharnhorst, so he's safe from the torpedoes. And there's absolutely, like, unless he gets detonated or something, there's really nothing that can kill him now. So there we go. Strangers actually kills the Scharnhorst with HE shells. The remaining, what is that, Pensacola? I can't quite tell what that cruiser is, but yeah, the remaining Pensacola, or possibly not, and the Błyskawica are basically done for at this stage. Now this was again a close-ish game, but less close overall than the previous one. And actually for a standard battle, it wasn't half bad. It was kind of fun, because generally speaking, on a lot of maps, you prefer domination, or at least I prefer domination, because it forces your team to get stuck in. It forces your team to actually do something rather than sail around and be completely passive, because if you just cede control of the cap circles, you've lost. And that's kind of what happened in that first game. We didn't really struggle for those cap circles, and we ended up losing as a result. And I don't know, you might look at my performance in that first one and say, well, I was in a destroyer, I could have been trying to go and cap myself, but I don't know, I don't really feel like at any point I had time to go and try and cap. Anyhow, never mind the first game. Second game, win, and I got the final kill on the Błyskawica there. I don't know why I tried to drop torpedoes on him. That was a bit of a waste of time. But with that final kill, that took me to 78,000, nearly 79,000 damage. Top of the team with 1,950 base XP. As you can see, actually, it was quite a nice division result. Reta was second place and Strangers fourth. And overall, I was quite happy with this result. It was a fairly nice game. So, what do I think of this overall? I quite like it, but the fact that I already own a Błyskawica means I would be unlikely to buy this myself unless I was grinding Soviet destroyers specifically. And because I haven't played any Soviet destroyers, because I already have a Gremyashi at tier 5, I don't feel any particular need to go and buy this, given that I already have a Błyskawica. But if you don't have a Błyskawica, or even if you do, but you just want a Soviet captain trainer, this is a pretty decent choice. And we have had what are effectively premium Soviet ships before. Well, I'm thinking specifically of the Anshan here at tier 6, which is basically a premium Gnevny. But of course, it being on the Pan-Asian tree, it means you can't train your Soviet captains in it. So this is definitely more attractive as a result. But it is, in a lot of ways, it's somewhere in between. It's somewhere in between. It's sort of a Kiev, and it's sort of similar to the Błyskawica, but that torpedo capacity makes it maybe a lot more similar to the Mayhem, for instance, and the ability to make stealth drops. So, as I said at the end of the first match, it really is trading some of that raw primary firepower for the ability to be stealthy and make stealth drops, and of course just the raw speed of the thing as well is also very useful. So overall, it's a pretty nice ship. So hopefully you have found this preview useful, and if you have, you can leave any comments below. You can hit the like button, you can sub to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.